We now move to First Minister's questions. Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I know the Chamber will allow me to note that today is the funeral of Ian McCormack, the late Member of Parliament for Argyll, and Mr Swinney is attending on behalf of the Scottish Government. Ian was the brother of Neil McCormack, the son of John McCormack, the great Home Ruler. He was a fine Member of Parliament for Argyll. He went to vote terminally ill last Thursday because he wanted to cast his vote in the referendum in person, and we're all going to miss him very much indeed.
Joanne Lamont.
Thank you. And on our side, of course, we would send our condolences to his family at what is a very sad time. For the last 6 weeks, the First Minister has warned the people of Scotland, some might even say has misled them, that the NHS would be privatised if there was a no vote. That the NHS would be privatised if there was a no vote. Well, last week there was a vote, and we now know that it is the sovereign will of the people of Scotland to stay strong in the United Kingdom. But some weeks before that no vote, the First Minister of Scotland privatised the medical records of every Scot in the country. Why did he keep that quiet until after the referendum? Isn't it the case that Alex Salmond has done more to privatise the NHS than anyone else in Scottish history?
First Minister. First Minister.
No, it's not the case. The Scottish Primary Care Information Resource is an IT system which replaces another IT system. To describe a contract for the Scottish Primary Care Information Resource as privatisation, it's like saying that this Parliament is being privatised because we use the Windows system in our computers. It is a ridiculous argument to put forward. The Spire system gives very substantial advantages in terms of the collection and governance of information throughout the National Health Service. It's right and proper that the Government have sought and received guarantees on the data security. That is absolutely the right thing to do. But for Joanne Lamont, who denied, indeed, I think Alistair Darling actually said that no government would privatise. I should have a look at what Andy Burnham has been saying at the Labour Party conference, confirming the route to privatisation and charging that they believe is going on at Westminster at the present moment. So given that is now being confirmed by the Labour Party, will there be some acceptance of the knock-on effect that has in Scotland in terms of finance and the importance, the critical importance for Scotland's future of controlling not just the administration but the finances of our National Health Service?
Joanne Lamont.
It might be a while since we last had an exchange of questions. That is no more credible than anything else you've answered over the last period. Because the First Minister and his anointed successor Nicola Sturgeon have increased the number of NHS patients treated privately by almost 500%. He spends £100 million of public money on private health care. This government privatised our health records during a campaign in which he claimed the health service would be privatised if we didn't vote for him. And guess what? He was privatising it anyway. Now that the campaign is over, will the First Minister be honest with the people of Scotland and admit he is doing more to privatise the NHS than anyone else in Scotland?
First Minister.
Less than 1% of Health Board expenditure goes to the private sector in Scotland. The figure in England is already 6%. According to the Labour Party, it's heading towards 20%. To describe a software and IT system as an example of privatisation, when the same company, incidentally, already provides such systems to the health boards in Scotland and has done so since 1998, it is what happens to the Labour Party. I've said that the Daily Telegraph has become the House Journal. If the Daily Mail has become the source material of the Labour Party, then we can see why their questions get ever more ridiculous. The position for the Scottish Health Service is a simple one. That is to say, if there is a move to privatisation south of the border, that is the move to privatisation and the introduction of charging, and therefore a lowering of public spending south of the border, then that impacts on the finance of the Scottish Health Service. That is why, in order to keep our National Health Service in public hands, then we have to control both the finances and the administration. That is what we should do, that is what we intend to do, and that is what is supported by the overwhelming majority of the Scottish people.
Joanne Lamont.
There has been a huge increase in private spending on the First Minister's watch. He knows it. So perhaps the First Minister could break the habits of a lifetime and indulge in a little truth-mongering. The First Minister claimed, and now appears to continue to claim, the NHS would be privatised if there was a no vote. But as he said that, he was increasing the amount of public money spent on private health providers. And the First Minister, 6 weeks before the referendum, privatised the health records of every person in Scotland. Will the First Minister just admit that he has done more to privatise the NHS in Scotland than any other politician in history?
First Minister. Order.
An IT system and the use of a computer system from a company which already provides IT systems to GPs across Scotland, it does not constitute privatisation of the National Health Service. What it constitutes is having a better IT system than we have at the present moment. Joanne Lamont has argued that I should be speaking and I should beware of my anointed successor. As I read in the papers, that there seems to be a number of anointed successors for Joanne Lamont. But she can be confident in the support of the members of Parliament which she leads at Westminster. One quoted in the Herald asked if Miss Lamont was under threat, said, yes, people will rally round, but the sharks will be circling. Now, can I say to Joanne Lamont, that one leadership election and political parties in Scotland is enough at any one time. But we can be absolutely confident that whatever else happens, then there will be a lot more people voting in the SNP leadership election than there would be in the Labour Party one.
Joanne Lamont.
Don't worry, when the First Minister is long gone, I will still be doing my job on behalf of the people of Scotland. And as an optimist, I hope the coronation of Nicola Sturgeon still ensures that she might answer a question or two, which self-evidently her boss has not been able to do so. But to the serious business of this government, we now know, because of the courage of a whistleblower, that there are £450 million worth of cuts the First Minister is planning to the NHS. But he decided not to tell us until after the referendum. During the referendum campaign, the First Minister secretly privatised the health records of every Scot, while warning. It is astonishing that he was privatising the health records of every Scot while warning of the dangers of privatisation. The First Minister has increased spending on private health care to £100 million. I ask the First Minister, why does he say he's against privatising the health service when that is exactly what he is doing? When was he planning to tell us about the £100 million spent in private health? When was he going to tell us about the privatising of our health records? And when was he going to tell us, in honesty, about the £500 million worth of cuts to our precious health service?
First Minister.
MSDI, the company concerned, has supplied software to the National Health Service across the UK since 1998. So by definition, that means that Tony Blair must have been privatising the health service in 1998. Actually, I think he started the process of privatisation when they pushed through foundation hospitals in the National Health Service in England, including to Scottish health boards. They were involved in the design and management of existing systems to calculate payments for GP practices across Scotland. An IT system, a computer system, does not represent privatisation of the National Health Service, nor does a £450 million cost pressure over the next 2 years, of which the most... Well, the cost pressures are caused by both pensions and the ending of the national insurance rebate, both decisions taken by the Westminster Government. Now, does that not exemplify the position of the Scottish Government, that cost pressures originating from Westminster have huge impact in the Scottish National Health Service? I am delighted to confirm to this chamber we have increased health service spending in the front line in real terms, and we will continue to do so. I am delighted to tell this chamber that the vast majority of people in Scotland understand why we have to control the finances of this country and our health service, as well as the administration, if we are to be prevented from Tory and Labour attempts to privatise our health service. I think Joanne Lamont says she's going to retain in her current position. Yes, I hope she behaves and continues as leader of the opposition in this Parliament for some considerable time. But if so, it won't be because of the enthusiastic support of her own colleagues. Quote, "The catastrophic thing would be for her to go and not to have Jim Murphy as leader. If we end up with an MSP or Anna Sarwar, we might as well go home for 2016. Now, I am not as pessimistic about the Labour Party's prospects as the Labour Party. I am sure that Joanne Lamont will put off an excellent fight in the coming election and end up exactly where she is now, as this party continues the National Health Service in public hands."
Question 2, Ruth Davidson.
And that's why we need a woman's touch. To ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
No plans, near future.
Ruth Davidson.
Thank you. It emerged following questioning by my colleague Gavin Brown yesterday that we will not have a programme for government from this administration until late November. But bizarrely, we will have a budget before that. In other words, this government is going to draft a budget for a legislative programme that doesn't exist. The First Minister spoke at great length about what would happen in the event of a yes vote and the team that he was building for the first 100 days. But he doesn't appear to have any plan for the first 8 weeks now that he's lost. The people of Scotland demand that we get back to the real issue. People want to see a Scottish Government working in the interests of all of Scotland. Why should they have to wait 2 more months for this government to do its job?
First Minister.
Well, the government will be publishing the budget, as Ruth Davidson correctly says. We'll be bringing forward a bill on land reform following the report of the review group. We'll be introducing a bill to end automatic early release. We're in the process of delivering the Ryder Cup, which I hope will emulate the Commonwealth Games as one of the most successful sporting events that Scotland has ever seen. We're bringing forward the regulations to allow the first same-sex marriages in Scotland.
Order.
Introducing from January free school meals from primaries 1 to 3, something which, if I remember, the Labour Party were foolish enough to vote against when it came to this chamber. We're working with all stakeholders to secure the success and ongoing operation of Ferguson shipyards. We're going to have stage 3 of the Court Reform Bill to streamline civil justice. And of course, the figures on the economy indicate that the efforts of the Scottish Government in both employment and unemployment, particularly in the huge increase in women's employment, are bearing some fruit. Now, I've got a list of another a dozen things that the Scottish Government is employed in at the present moment. I could read out that list as well. I'm sure there'll be a lot of enthusiasm to read out the list. I think we've already made the point that the Scottish Government is getting on with the job of governing Scotland effectively, which is perhaps why its opinion poll ratings are now at almost 50%, about 5 times that of the Scottish Conservative Party.
Ruth Davidson.
Spectacular lack of legislation that's to come in there. Can it really be that the First Minister doesn't get it, because we now have at least 2 more months of what the papers are describing as a zombie government. And in the meantime, the First Minister will pick up another £20,000 worth of taxpayers' money as salary. He'll go on his farewell photo-op tour before the inevitable happens and his deputy will take over. We know that the First Minister has plenty of time in his hands, because that's what he told us all in a green ink letter that he wrote to a national newspaper this week. But we know that it's not legislation that he's working on, it's his book deal. So if the First Minister is in office but not in power, can he tell us what's the point of him hanging around?
First Minister.
Well, I suppose the reason, or one of them, that the Scottish National Party about half an hour ago had 62,870 members is that membership expects us to go through a democratic process in terms of first the election of a leader and deputy leader, and then through this Parliament in terms of the election of a First Minister. I've already indicated to Ruth Davidson the substantial efforts and work of the government, including legislation that's going on as we speak. I know that we'll have the enthusiastic support of the Scottish Conservative Party, particularly for the important measures in land reform, which I know is so close to the heart of Jamie McGrigor and other members of the Scottish. Can I say to the Scottish Conservative Party, we have no intention whatsoever in not allowing the landowners of Scotland to develop renewable energy in their substantial holdings. And we know across that range of legislation, this Conservative Party, as ever, in that total democratic phase of which they are so famous, will give us substantial support on virtually nothing, because the Scottish people recognise that the Scottish National Party epitomises in that programme the wishes of the vast majority of the people of Scotland. Hence the democratic success of this party and the undemocratic lack of success of the Conservative Party.
Neil Findlay.
The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are proposing to cut whole-time fire provision in West Lothian from 77 to 61, a reduction of 16 firefighters. Local people are rightly up in arms about this and are very concerned about safety issues. Can I ask the First Minister if he thinks such a significant cut is acceptable, and will he meet with me to discuss the concerns being raised by my constituents about these cuts?
First Minister.
There is crewing changes, but there's no job losses whatsoever involved in these crewing changes. If the member is concerned about it, I'll arrange for a relevant meeting so he can carry forward these concerns. But I find it difficult to understand if, as I am told, that there are no job losses involved, then why the member describes the situation in the way he's just done. But nonetheless, let's have the meeting and see if he can articulate the concerns and get to the bottom of what his question entailed.
Question 3 will read.
To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet.
First Minister.
Issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Mulroney.
Yesterday I heard John Swinney set out his support for Home Rule and federalism. He joins illustrious company, Gladstone, Grimman, Gordon Brown, and now, of all people, Michael Forsyth. Ming Campbell published our plans for Home Rule and federalism 2 years ago. Can the First Minister tell me if he is now a supporter of federalism, and if so, which bits of our plan does he think we can find common cause?
First Minister.
I think there is an expectation after the referendum, and that's carried a wide canvas, that given the comments, for example, not of Gladstone, but certainly of Gordon Brown, that what he was espousing was home rule as close to federalism as it possibly can be, then people will want to see a genuine powerhouse parliament coming from the steps being taken at Westminster, rather than the rather insipid group of proposals which were published last spring. So in terms of securing the jobs test for a powerhouse parliament, then I shall be standing shoulder to shoulder with William Gladstone, Gordon Brown and Willie Rennie.
Mr Rennie.
Well, I thank for that constructive engagement, but he should remember that the plans that were put forward before the voters last week were the plans set out by our three parties. I'm looking forward to his plans that come forward as well, because then we can create a Scottish Parliament.
Order.
A Scottish Parliament with the tax powers to give us the flexibility, the agility to do things differently in Scotland, powers to tackle inequality, invest for the long term and create a stronger economy and a fairer society, driving down power into the communities, which I'm sure he is strongly in favour of, and creating a federal UK. Does he think that he's not commented so far on our proposals? Can he find common cause, comment on what we have put forward and engage in a proper, constructive discussion?
First Minister.
Yes, I think that we'll be able to have a very constructive discussion to try and improve Scotland's situation and circumstances. I have to say, I don't follow the position about Home Rule and as close to federalism as Willie Rennie espouses, given these were not, as I can see, what was produced last spring, although it was what was talked about in the referendum campaign. I was struck during the campaign by a tweet from someone saying, "I'm voting no, then supporting anyone who'll give us Dave O'Max." That was a tweet from J.K. Rowling, who was the lead donor of the No campaign. And it does seem to emphasise that there is a considerable expectation among many people who voted no and indeed financed the campaign, a very substantial expectation of seeing real economic powers. The one difficulty I have in a conversation with Willie Rennie, as we did on Tuesday, when I mentioned that in my reading of the Campbell Commission report, they were proposing the ending of the Barnett formula against the vow that was produced last week. Willie Rennie denied that in the chamber. So I went back to the Campbell Commission report just in case I had misread or was misrepresenting the position. And I'm puzzled, actually, because paragraph 131, followed by recommendation 26, says, and I'll just quote the recommendation, "The UK should move to an independent, transparent, need-based formula to serve all parts of the UK, allow fiscal federalism to be sustained in the long term, recognising that the Barnett formula was only ever intended to be a temporary measure." Now, I think Willie Rennie is going to have to, at some stage, clarify what exactly the Liberal Democrats are proposing. Is it what was in the Campbell report, or is it what was in the vow? I think you might find that my successor, whoever he or she may be slightly less indulgent with Willie Rennie's misremembering of his own policies than I have been over the last few years.
Question 4, Roderick Campbell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government plans to discuss with the UK Government extending the voting franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds.
First Minister.
Yes, around 90% of all 16 and 17-year-olds registered to vote in the Scottish independence referendum. As I made clear in this chamber on Tuesday, their thoughtful and passionate engagement in this debate means there's now an overwhelming, indeed unanswerable case for giving 16 and 17-year-olds a vote in all future elections in Scotland and indeed across the UK. I'm delighted that this case now has the support of all parties across this chamber. The Deputy First Minister yesterday wrote to the Prime Minister urging the UK Government to devolve full responsibility for elections to the Scottish Parliament as a matter of urgency, so that we can ensure that 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to take part in the 2016 election.
Lord Campbell.
Thank you, First Minister. I welcome those comments and indeed the comments you made on Tuesday. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it would be wrong to remove the vote from 16 and 17-year-olds after having allowed them to help choose the future of the country. Can he assure me that this issue will remain a priority of the Scottish Government and that this issue will be discussed the next time he does meet the Prime Minister?
First Minister.
Yes, I can assure that, and I've already indicated to Roderick Campbell that yesterday the Deputy First Minister wrote to the Prime Minister. Now that there is a consensus on this issue, then we have to keep faith with these youngsters who voted in the referendum and also the next peer group of youngsters who are coming forward. I think it would be a substantial setback in democratic terms if in our 2016 elections that 16 and 17-year-olds were not entitled to vote. And therefore I think there must be a sharp focus on securing the ability to make sure that our elections in 2016 extend that franchise and we keep faith for the young people who demonstrated in such overwhelming numbers that they were well able and willing to take part in democratic discourse.
Question 5, Jack Bailey.
to ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on raising the minimum wage to £8 an hour.
First Minister.
We welcome any increase in the national minimum wage, which has failed to keep up with inflation in recent years, leaving workers over £600 worse off than they otherwise would have been. I also note that the proposed increase coming from the Labour conference is phased, will not take place until 2020, meaning it's an increase of just 82 pence in real terms. The expert group in welfare suggested that Scotland should explore increasing the minimum wage to the level of the living wage. Those are the proposals which I hope will be considered as part of the package of more powers to this Parliament.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response? He is, of course, aware that Ed Miliband is proposing a national minimum wage rate of £8 per hour to make sure that work pays. The majority of this chamber support this, as they do the living wage, currently set at £7.65 per hour. And although the SNP government didn't take the opportunity to bring in the living wage for all those delivering public sector contracts, will he now work with Labour to ensure that for the public sector and for those engaged in delivering public sector contracts, that their wages are increased to £8 an hour, so that we can help to address the cost of living crisis and help working people who are struggling in communities across Scotland right now?
First Minister.
Well, can I just point out to Jackie Baillie, if the minimum wage had kept pace with inflation since 2008, it would already be £7.48 an hour. The proposal to increase to £8, though welcome, is a proposal for 2020. That includes, as I said, a 2% increase year by year to get there by 2020, which is actually less than the increase that was taking place in the minimum wage before 2008. The people on low wages have been betrayed by successive Westminster governments, including when Alistair Darling was Chancellor, in offering increases to the minimum wage which were less than in inflation. And therefore, what I think is hugely important is to understand that the living wage by 2020, even if it was only to keep pace with inflation, would be £8.57 an hour in the forecast. And I think this whole Parliament should aspire to do that, to raise the minimum wage to the living wage as recommended in our welfare proposals. And when this Parliament has control over the minimum wage, then I'm quite certain that the progressive instincts of Jackie Baillie and myself will ensure that we move towards the living wage in Scotland.
Gavin Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. If the minimum wage were to have increased in line with the commitments in the White Paper, in which year would it reach £8 an hour?
First Minister.
If the minimum wage commitments in the White Paper are to a guarantee from the Fair Wage Commission that it keeps pace at least with inflation, and therefore would be in a fundamentally better position than we've been over the last few years, when first the Labour Party and then the Conservative Party, going through a recession, decided to penalise the lowest paid people in the country. Gavin Brown, I think, wasn't among the most enthusiastic supporters of this government's introduction of the living wage across the public sector. But I think we have been totally vindicated, and that is the answer from the electorate in terms of the introduction of the living wage at £7.65 an hour now, and therefore we look forward to raising the level of the minimum wage to the living wage, so that all workers in Scotland get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work.
Question 6, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government is doing to capitalise on the legacy of the Ryder Cup.
First Minister.
Well, golf tourism is already worth £220 million to Scotland annually and supports 4,400 jobs. The 2014 Ryder Cup is the perfect catalyst for further growth in golf tourism, as well as reinforcing Scotland's position as the home of golf. Visit Scotland estimates it will benefit our economy by at least £100 million. One of the most important aspects of the process which has brought the Ryder Cup to Scotland is the commitment made as part of the Ryder Cup bid by Henry McLeish as First Minister. And that has been taken forward, and 350,000 youngsters across Scotland have been introduced to the game of golf. Yesterday I announced that that club golf programme would be continued and indeed extended into a family golf approach, where the youngsters will ask their parents to come and play with them, emphasising that golf should be a game for everyone in Scotland. I also note that in the Ryder Cup that 50 young unemployed people volunteered to get the increase in skills and to improve their future employment opportunities. All round, I think, just as the Commonwealth Games was a remarkable success for the City of Glasgow and for the nation of Scotland, we intend to do exactly the same thing with the Ryder Cup in Gleneagles.
Honourable Fraser.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response. I'm sure we all welcome the work that is ongoing to capitalise on its benefits, although I was interested to hear from the First Minister earlier that he seems to think the Ryder Cup is part of his legislative programme for the coming year. But I wonder if the First Minister, with his upcoming retirement from office, is looking forward, as much as we are, to him spending more time with his golf clubs.
First Minister.
I'm looking forward enormously to playing golf as often as possible, but I suspect that the wishes of the Conservative Party to see me disappear from the Scottish body politic are going to be as disappointing to them as future election results in Scotland will almost undoubtedly be.
That ends First Minister's questions. We are moving to members' business, so members who leave the chamber should do so quickly and quietly.